Once upon a time, there was a company known as Takeru, also known as Seirei Wave, a company that was formed by numerous ex-Capcom members, those individuals being with the likes of Akira Kitamura, Shinichi Yoshimoto, and later joined by Koichi Yotsui. I mean, if you hear these three people, it wasn't a bad approach. Akira Kitamura, responsible with directing both Rockman or Mega Man 1 and 2, Shinichi Yoshimoto helped with the designing production of the Strider and Ghouls of Ghost, and Koichi Yotsui responsible for directing Strider as a whole. Well, you get the idea. This company had a vision to make a great games, but unfortunately it faded to the existence and became a small footnote of the video game history. Nevertheless, they did give it a shot with 3 major titles. They started off their career as seeing a success from Kokoron, the action platformer that has a Rockman vibe thanks to Akira Kitamura's direction, and the gameplay involved the early customizations of the playable characters, which was quite unique for its time. Then they made point-and-click adventure game on consoles such as Sharp X68000 and Sega Mega CD with Nostalgia 1907. Having a mixed review with many of the critiques saying the way of the game's interactivity was poorly constructed within the point-and-click adventure games, the game itself was a commercial failure and put Takeru on the financial crisis. Meanwhile, companies such as Taito, who were sought after looking for their own potential mascot characters, who were strong and appealing as much as Mario, Sonic, and just like Mario and Sonic at the time. So in 1992, they teamed up with Takeru in the venture of Shinichi Yoshimoto's creative approach. They made what people would often consider as one of the best games ever made on the Famicom. This is Little Samson. Seirei Densetsu Lickle, most commonly known as Little Samson, is an action-adventure game for the Nintendo Famicom, released on June 26, 1992. It was soon sought to release on November of 1992 in the United States and March of 1993 in European territory. The game unfortunately had a poor sale as in general due to the lack of promotion with the game. Furthermore, consoles like Super Nintendo or Sega Genesis was out at the time, so even if the NES was still around and the companies were developing games for it, most of them, especially the customers, had already moved on to the next generation of video game console. Seems like Taito has been publishing many of the rare titles for the NES throughout the early 90s at least. If I can name some of them, well, there's Power Blade 2, Bubble Bobble 2, Flintstone Surprise at Dinosaur Peak, Panic Restaurant, and my personal favorite, the Jetsons Cogswell's Caper. And Little Samson is also one of them for the rare Taito published games. And till this very day, this game is considered by many to be the sought-out rarest and the most valuable NES title to own. So what makes it so appealing? Well, let's take a look. The plot of this game revolves around a dark prince is freed and tries to take over the kingdom and the world. The king soon recruits 4 heroes who has a position for the magic bell, hence why it helps the players in Japan with the better understanding with the Japanese title, which in literal translation means Holy Bell Legend Lickle. Anyway, it's up for these 4 heroes to stop the Dark Prince and save the world. These 4 heroes have their own individual strengths and weaknesses, and it's a huge plus from the play value with the usage of these characters. Lickle, Little Samson, is the average player who can jump high, climb walls, throwing bells, and run fast. Kikira the Dragon is a dragoness. She has an ability to shoot fire, not slipping on ice, and she hovers in mid-air for the short period of time. Game the Golem is the big hero who is slow, but he has a powerful punches that can also be performed uppercut while jumping in mid-air, and he can also walk on spikes. Finally, strangest yet cutest of all, in my opinion, is KO the Mouse. He's a pretty weak character in terms of health, but he is definitely the fastest out of all the players. He can climb through walls just like Lickle, and he has an ability to set the powerful bomb pallets. This whole character selection thing, in my perspective, has similar vibes to the United States version of Super Mario Bros. 2, you know, the one with Doki Doki Panic, where each characters have individual strengths and weaknesses and abilities. But unlike Super Mario Bros. 2, the players in this game can switch the character whenever they were pleased to during the in-game gameplay. Kinda like the first Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles game. But in comparison with those two games, I think this game has more balance to it. Within selecting a character, it makes the players to think on which situation they have to use what character on a certain aspect of the stage. So for instance, there's a wall that I might need to climb, while there's like the pits in between. Then I will switch from Kikira to either Lickle or KO the Mouse. Another example, on a certain occasion, if you try to defeat the boss, you can have an advantage of having, let's say, Kikira for flying to defend yourself with the several attacks by hovering in mid-air, then switch to Game for the more effective damage with his punches. This method of having a character select screen is really strategical. It gets people to think which character they quickly need to use, hence why it makes the game more challenging and exciting. Each characters have their own health status, much like TMNT. If one character loses the health meter, then you can quickly switch to the other characters who has more health bar or potion to refill the energy. In between stages, there are items mostly revolve around having more hit bars, hearts, and 1-ups, because since all the characters have their own individual abilities to play with. The level up challenge of the stages in this game is where it really sings, in my opinion. There are basically two modes, which are easy and normal mode. One is slightly harder than the other one, and you can guess which one. However, having an easy mode is also a good practice for the normal mode in order to get the good ending, because while it's still quite challenging for as it is when you're playing the easy mode, it doesn't really off-putting the players. The stages have a good balanced layout that is fun to traverse. The enemies, while some of them can be annoying, but it's still easy to defeat them for the most of the part when you decide which character you decide to defeat certain enemies. Bosses are honestly epic. I'm truly just being genuine here. It's not too difficult nor too easy to depict the pattern of the bosses, so definitely it makes players to face the level of difficulty acceptable gradually, because it's fairly good when it comes to facing increasing difficulties and the challenges. This game also has the shortest and sweetest password system I've seen in a long time, only 4 characters to put. The only disadvantage for the password system is that your power-ups that you've got before won't be restored whenever you enter a password, and keep in mind, the game requires you to get most of the items from the beginning stages, so putting a password have its own limitation, but at least it's short. Speaking of boss fights, look at their graphical sprites, or just take a look at the in-game graphics in general. It really is spot on for the 8-bit Famicom game, and visually, it's an eye candy. It kinda has those quirky cartoony vibes for some enemies, and hell, even the main characters are adorably designed, but the rest of the graphics has a kinda like a Castlevania vibe to it, but much more colorful and diverse. Hence, the game gives an enjoyable atmosphere to traverse through the level to level. And overall, graphically, this is really beautiful. For the Famicom game, at least. If there's any weakness from this game, it's probably the soundtrack department. Each characters have their own theme song, which are fine, but that means there's not much of an individual stage theme songs, except for the boss rounds and the last stage at the castle. One thing I found it to be annoying is that if, let's say, you pick a same character from the pause screen, the music repeats from the beginning, which I found it to be a minor annoyance. On the bright side though, the sound effects are great, especially when you hit the enemies or bosses. It makes that clunk noise, which is so satisfying for some reason. Not to mention it gives you the clear indication that you're actually damaging your enemy. And if I could sum this game up with the right terminology to describe the overall gameplay as a whole, a solidarity of every satisfaction elements of making a perfect game. And this game is one of them. This game is hands down just marvelous. Good controls, good level of difficulty build up, good music, good graphics, and overall, it's an amazing team game. And I sincerely mean it. So how come this game didn't get a critical attention until in the recent years, where it should have been on the one of the NES classics back in the 90s? Well, as I've stated before, the new generation of gaming, such as Super Nintendo or Sega Genesis, came to the market around that time, and everyone was going crazy for the Bit Wars, and mostly moving on to the advanced gaming console. The other aspect is just the theory, the misunderstanding of the title that has coincidentally referred with the English character Little Samson as the character from the Bible. Furthermore, within the Japanese title of the Little English translation, Holy Bell, might have put off some gamers with the association of the religious aspect with the words such as holy, which means divine for the Lord. They usually refer to it as our God is holy. And trust me, people try to stay away from the religious games for the most of the times. Little Samson was initially Takeru's last NES title, and it's such a shame that they ended with the game that has a high note, because Little Samson till this very day is still considered by many to be a holy grail of the NES library, and it shows. Takeru and Taito might not have seen a huge profit or success with its initial release of the game, but they definitely made some of the best NES game of all time, just like Little Samson on the NES, one of the best NES games of all time.